All right, so in this tutorial, we're going to be learning what a landscape is and how to create a landscape. So to find the landscape, you're going to go to modes and you're going to choose landscape mode. And the landscape is going to be created on this green grid. You could adjust the size if you wanted to, but for now, we're going to go ahead and just leave it as the default settings. If you wanted to make it bigger, you could fill the world, but again, we're just going to leave that as it is right now. And it probably is going to look something like this. As far as the material, just to get us started, let's just choose a grass material, ground grass. And you can do that by clicking here. And then I'm going to click create. And so now our scene is a little less boring. We have a nice flat area around it. You'll see that there are these large squares on there. Those are going to go away after you build your lighting. We'll get to that later, what that means. But you can ignore that for now. It's not going to cause any problems, and it's not going to be there when we actually go to play the game, when it's packaged. So the default is going to take you to the Sculpt tool, and you have Manage, Sculpt, and Paint. So let's just stick to Sculpt for now. And in the Sculpt mode, if you click, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to give you some tricks that are going to show you how to do some realistic looking mountains. So if you do anything right now, Control Z it and just go back to flat. And then, make sure you look at everything before you start really trying to hammer this out. So it looks good. Right now I'm going down instead of up, and I'm doing that by holding down the Shift key. So if I don't hit Shift, it goes up. And if I do hit Shift, it's going to go down. You can change your brush settings. For example, you can make the strength much, much higher, which means it's going to go much faster. Or you could bring the strength way down if you want something a little bit more subtle. Just some little hills, as you can see right there. You can also change the radius or size of your brush. If you know you want a huge area to lift up, like that. And the fall of the brush is going to determine how soft and round it is. If you have no fall off, it's going to be a very clean circle, but it's going to look pretty unnatural. So the default on that is 0.5. Just keep it somewhere around there is fine. Once you do create some stuff, you might want it to smooth out because the edges are a little bit rough, and you can use the smooth tool. That's just going to give you a nice even mound. And one of my favorite tools is the ramp tool. And you can use that just for navigability in your level. If I know that I want my character to be able to walk here, I can build a ramp. Obviously, if the ramp is too steep, you won't be able to climb it. So just kind of keep that in mind. You can make your ramp thicker or thinner by adjusting the ramp width. And the edges can be adjusted with the side fall off. If you have the side fall off all the way here, then it's going to look very unnatural. But if you have the side fall off all the way in the middle, it's going to look a little bit more natural, but it might be a little harder to climb up because there's not going to be much space. So you're just going to have to find that balance. You can make your ramp, again, thin or thick or whatever. And again, you just do that by clicking on the place you want to start, click on the place you want to end, adjust the parameters, and add your ramp. So now maybe my character can climb up this little section. The next thing that I would play around with, and I think, hang on, I'll wait until this is over. Practice was canceled, JV guys, sorry. But you can attend varsity practice, so that's good. Okay, so let's talk about noise, which is kind of one of my favorites. And with noise, when I click, it just goes crazy. And so a lot of students see that and they immediately say, no, I don't want to mess with that. But let's try this. Let me reset all these settings here. If we kind of tone it down a little bit. Okay, now we're starting to get some kind of weird stuff happening, but not very useful to me. But try this. Try changing this noise mode to add only and make the noise scale pretty big. Give yourself a nice big brush. And pull the strength down. Let's just see what that looks like. And I'm going to pull the strength way down. And you can see it's kind of starting to feel a little bit more like a natural formation of a mountain. And without doing a lot of work, it kind of does, the part of making it kind of bumpy and uneven, and it does that part for you. And then as you kind of do the macro, the big stuff, and you can see I'm kind of covering up some areas, so I can actually pull this noise mode to subtract, and I could pull it down right here. Say, oh, actually, I want to pull it over there. And maybe that'd be a good spot for a lake or something. And maybe you say, oh, yeah, too much going on over there. Let me just pull it back. And then pull your scale. I'm going to go back to, let's go to both now. I'm going to pull my scale down. And I'm just going to click around, and you'll see that it starts to kind of create these rocky looking edges to it. And my strength is really low on here because I don't want it to, I don't want to get carried away with it. And maybe even a little bit smaller noise scale as you start to do a little less and a little less. If you want things to look really rough and rocky, depends on, the type of mountain, of course. You could make your brush a little smaller and really kind of start doing some detail work there if you wanted to. And if you feel like you overdid it, you can always jump back to the smooth brush or maybe play around with some erosion. Let's erode this mountain a little bit. And if you wanted it to kind of carve out some natural rivers, you could play around with hydro erosion. So then it's going to be like it was raining. And I'm going to pull the strength all the way up so you can see this quickly. And it's going to look for some kind of valleys to carve out. And you might get little sections that look like that, and that might not be what you want. So I don't know. I've not had the best luck with hydro, but you can see it here. It's kind of creating some rivers and stuff. So you can mess around with that as well. And so, yeah, we're starting to get this little area that starts to feel a little bit more natural. And as you start to walk around, you might find some areas are too high or too low, and you can always come back and you can flatten them and say, you know what, I really want this section right here just to be flat. So I'm just going to get a nice, fairly big brush. And I'm just going to say, yeah, I want that to all be like this. And that looks pretty unnatural. So now I need to come in and maybe do some erosion to kind of smooth that out. The strength is too high, but whatever. And just to kind of give this a little bit more of a natural feel. There we go. So now that I've done that, I'm going to come in and I'm going to go to my manage bar here. Sorry, I'm going to go to my modes bar here and change it back to select. And I'm going to get rid of these walls. And you'll see that it's a little bit above ground. You could take your entire landscape and you got to find where the handles are and just pull it up a little bit if you wanted to. Probably the easiest way because there's only one thing you have to move. And let's go ahead and hit play. And let's try walking around here and just see how that feels with the scale. Is it, is it a nice big size? Is it too big? Is it too small? Depends on what your level is. And you can just kind of walk around and get a feel for what it's like. Is there areas where you can't go, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Do you want to be able to navigate to the tops of the mountains, or do you want to kind of keep it confined to this little section right here? That's going to be up to you. This could be a landscape that's just aesthetic that you see when you peek out the windows and you never actually get to explore it, in which case that's going to change how much you need to worry about things like that. If it's definitely a landscape you're going to be exploring and you have sections that you could potentially get stuck in, like maybe I can't get out of here because it's too steep, you'll have to kind of navigate it and see how it feels. If you want to add, in fact, I do want you to add a lake as well, or any body of water. There are some advanced water stuff we can get into later, but for now, let's go back into our landscape mode. And we're going to go to manage instead of sculpt, and we're going to click a new landscape. Now this landscape doesn't need to be quite as large, so I'm actually going to, number of components, I'm going to pull it down to just something like this. And the lower it is, the less area it's going to cover. Let me just rotate it and get it in here. Something like that. Okay. So maybe we're just going to have a lake right there. So what I'm going to do is change this material to water. And there's a couple of waters you can choose from. You probably want to go with lake since it's clearly not an ocean. And then you just click create and give it a second. And you can see that now you have this nice little lake right here. Is the water transparent? No. You can get better looking water, and that's definitely going to be something that you'll have the opportunity to do. You'll notice one thing that's kind of funny though is that when I walk on this water, intuitively you might think, oh, I'm just going to sink in the water. But if you think about it, we didn't tell the computer to do that. This is just a landscape. We just gave it a water material. So it's still going to behave like the floor, and it's not going to be something you can sink through. So if we want to make changes to that, we're going to need to go back into our select mode. And you can always move it up and down if you decide that you want it to be a little higher or lower. And then I'm going to make the collision on this object no longer block everything. So with it selected, I'm going to scroll down to collision under the details panel, and I'm going to change the collision presets to an overlap all. Now let's watch what happens. Forgot where my lake was. Now we can actually go in the water. And it doesn't look like you're underwater, and that's fine. We have to make it look like it, and we can do that later. The last thing we want to do, you'll notice all these squares and everything looks a little funky. We want to build our lighting. And so to do that, we're going to hit the build button, but before we do, let's find something that's already on the level, and it's called a light mass importance volume. If you want to search for it, you go to the world outliner, and you just type in light mass importance volume. You can double click on it to select it. And we want to make this the same size as where our player is going to be in the level. It doesn't have to fill in your entire landscape, and the bigger it is, the longer it's going to take to build your lighting. So we just want that volume right here to fill. Oops, made that way too tall. We just want it to fill our scene. And there we go. I can kind of see it from a few different angles. Still too tall. So again, the bigger this is, the longer it's going to take. But you just want to make sure it covers your scene. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm going to hit build. And it's going to take a few minutes, but what it's going to do is it's going to compile all that stuff that we just did. And it's going to figure out how the light's going to hit it. And it's going to, what's called bake the information of the lighting into the material so that it looks correct. Those grids are going to go away, and it's going to look a lot cleaner. Let's see. And the lighting is done, and you can see those grids go away, and everything is pretty ready. I don't know what's, there it goes. There. So now when I hit play, you can see it looks a little bit more like a finished game at this point. And there are still some weird artifacts with the water. I'm not sure what's going on that, but yeah, it's looking kind of cool. So see what you can do and create some great landscapes yourself.